And in the years leading up to starting my summer camp, my wife and I noticed that our friends were constantly like figuring out excuses to call, like to drive through the neighborhood and then give us a call and say, hey, what's going on at your house? And suddenly I'd have 2 or 3 kids in the garage and we would be building together. And that was sort of what made me feel like I had some skill working with kids. But then the thing that really got me to get started with it was one time I was having tea with a friend, and her kid was playing around in the backyard and had picked up a stick, and she quickly jumped up from having tea, leaned out and said, remember the rule about sticks? And the kid dropped the stick. And there was a whole backstory to that incident that I didn't know, but it got me thinking that maybe adults don't give kids enough credit, you know, for what they can really do. So I started, I'm going to take you on a little tour of this room that I'm in because I'm starting a project right now with a bunch of kids. I started my summer camp, and I had this crazy idea that it would be just fine to give kids power tools, and that, you know, if they knew that they could hurt themselves with this tool, they would be more careful with it. So that was where we started. We started with one very simple rule, which was don't hurt yourself or anyone else. And that rule has stayed with us since the very beginning. And we apply it to everything. So you mentioned bullying in your, I can't remember, in your introduction or in your email. And we've had a few bullying incidents at the camp. And the way that we respond as the staff at the camp is to say, I think you might be breaking rule number 1 right here. And then the student has to explain how the situation applies to rule number 1. But would you like to hear what rule number 2 is?
Yes.
Rule number 2 was made by a young student named Harlow, and he was in our 2nd year of camp. He kept asking me if he could have a piece of fruit. And I said, Harlow, I think maybe we need a rule that covers this, because I can't just keep saying yes to you. And he was like, all right, what if rule number 2 is if you see a piece of fruit and you want it, you must eat it.
Oh.
So that's rule number 2, so that I never have to answer the question for kids, can I have a piece of fruit?
Right.
Because, you know, you get constantly interrupted by kids asking you for a snack or something like that. So we just put food out in the workshop, and if anybody wants it, they eat it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that was all before the virus, so
Right.
you can imagine that might change now.
The world
Mango.
is a bit different.
So we used to have mangoes in the shop, and the shop was a barn, and one side of the barn had goats in it. And we discovered that mango pits are not good for baby goats.
Oh, did you discover that the hard way?
Yeah, well, they get very bad digestive problems from it. It wasn't permanently harmful, but the ranch manager was like trying to figure out what it was they were eating. And one day she saw that the kids were just dropping the pit into the goat pen, which is what she told us to do with all the other food waste we had. And it was the mango pits. Once we stopped dropping those in, the goats returned. By the end of summer, they were all healthy. Everybody's upset stomachs were fixed.
Okay.
And, yeah.
And you learned an important lesson.
And we learned an important lesson that goats can't eat everything.
Right.